A very warm welcoming you back to this show, Humane Architecture on ThinkTech Hawaii. This happening to be the 359th episode. And we're back broadcasting live from half around the world near Munich, Germany. And happy to have you back, Jay, as my favorite guest. So welcome to the show. And so what we're going to do is talk on behalf of, maybe it's maybe a good idea to reiterate why do we do this show and on who behalf are we talking? I'm talking on behalf of me, Martin Despang, not on behalf of my employer, the University of Hawaii, but of course they hired me as an architect to teach architecture. So I'm speaking on behalf of that as an educator and as a practitioner, but I've also been borrowed out to the Scheidler School of Business in the TIM, Tourist Industry Management program, and teaching Resort 333, resort design. And while I'm here, the other Martin Anselini, our guest of many shows, is teaching that. And our exotic escapism expert, Susanne, who you see here, is also back to school and is in her master's of SIT, Strategies for Innovation in Tourism. So we're talking on behalf of that. And Jay, you had a wish where you send us, because last time we broadcasted some while ago, we were in Venice. Before that, we were in Vancouver, and before that we were in Barcelona for some, couple dozen shows, it feels like. So what was your choice? What's your favorite country close to us here in Europe, Jay?
Portugal.
There you go.
Second choice would be Barcelona.
All right, yeah, we've been in Barcelona, so now you send us to Portugal, which you see here. So this first slide here, Suzanne just got a friend saying paradise without palm trees, but of course paradise with palm trees is what we consider to be a paradise. And so here we see us at the ocean, at the Atlantic Ocean. And we also see a movement that we're part of, which is SHIFT, which is Southern Heritage and Insights for Transformation. That's a new movement that we're going to talk about a lot. And of course, Jay, this just can't be about, okay, we're traveling around having nothing but fun. Of course, we have that, but we're addressing serious issues that we're having here and now. And one of them, besides climate, is the housing crisis. And unfortunately, also to that regard, it doesn't look as bright anymore as it used to be. In Portugal, here you see a link to that you can read that they have a housing crisis as well. They have some ideas how to fix it, as you can tell here, especially for the young generation in which hands the future is. So let's hope. But when we were traveling, to the left is a picture we took out of, I wasn't driving, but we took the picture here. This is in Gaia, which is on the southern side of the Douro River that runs through Porto. That used to be open land that gets massively developed, as you can tell there. And the piece of architecture isn't that bad. At least we have lanais that we are missing increasingly in Honolulu. The green stuff is actually some vegetative walls. I mean, not that they're edible, they're more decorative. But it doesn't really knock us off the stool and saying, wow, this is the coolest. It's okay, and if you do a little online search here, you don't find much about social housing at all. In fact, it goes back to the master of Álvaro Siza and actually the mid-70s. Álvaro Siza is also where Suzanne's second mother of her homestay back then, as Sweet 16, was working for. And so you see this project here. We also want to reiterate, Jay, that what we do on this show is either what we have done or what we have seen ourselves with our own eyes. I know you've been very innovative early in welcoming AI, but this is all NI, natural intelligence, things that we, have no second doubts on if we know about it because we have experienced it. So this is something from about 2007 when I saw this. This is a very early Alvaro Siza cooperative housing, right? And that rings a bell because we've been talking about that in Barcelona, your second favorite choice, a lot. This is a picture I took through a window and then through a glass box, a plexiglass box, but you see that's basically it's 4 fingers attached to a wall. And the wall on the right might not everyone say, oh, this is beautiful, but it's an early example of also a very hot topic back in Honolulu, because that's why we do make these comparisons. This is TOD, transit-oriented development, because this goes right by a train station that also was designed by Siza and is his young son, academically, professionally speaking, Eduardo Soto de Moura. So our favorite place was, on behalf of our tourism angle, was a hotel. This is in Figueira del Foz, and Suzanne is going to butcher me because I'm not fluent or not at all knowledgeable in Portuguese language, but I'm trying to get as close as I can. What's about this? This is a hotel that has been built in the late 50s, and it is original. And when you see things from these times, you almost don't notice them, but here it's the entrance of your hotel room, and then you can close a door to your bedroom, and that door folds or opens into a flush position with the rest of the carpentry, which is very subtle. So this isn't something that jumps in your face and says, I am cool, right? This is cool in a very, very sophisticatedly, almost a shy way. And there's simple things as this doorknob that is out of brass, and it's been clear coated, and the clear coat is getting off, but there's the brass. And we've been talking about that. This is like how you welcome a building. You know, the handshake to a building is the doorknob, and that better be out of something good. There's also, we've talked ever since COVID, we made a reference to the very bottom left, a school we designed. This is us out of solid brass and copper. It also sanitizes your hands at the same time in just a natural, physical way. All the cabinetry inside is the original solid timber. Do we have that in Hawaii? Yes. This is Ethel. This is hot off the email. De Soto Brown delivered this book here that you're going to get the next copy delivered, Jay, soon. This is Ethel Nada, who has been the director of the Breakers Hotel in Waikiki ever since it opened. And it opened in the 50s, and we have 4 shows to reference at the very bottom right. And we celebrated the hotel's and De Soto Brown's 70th birthday 2 years ago in the hotel, and Ethel has been running it successfully ever since. So we really want to point out these treasures, right, from the good old days that we're struggling to do things as well these days. So this hotel back here is right at the beach, and we were doing here geometry, and Suzanne is up there and wanted to be convinced by me that these windows here, because this is curvilinear in plan and curvilinear in section. So these glass panels had to be produced in a trapezoidal way, which is quite an effort, but they went through that. Everyone in Hawaii should know Charles Chalot, who was a famous painter and muralist. And here is a fellow Portuguese. The hotel is still full of these. And the parquet, the wooden floor, is original. This reminds us of 4 shows about the Kahala Hilton. Also, the parquet floor, the wood floor in the Kahala Hilton is also original, as our dear friend Ron Lindgren, as part of the architectural team, has told us. This is off the web, and the source quoted correctly here. This is from 1953 when it was built. And again, Suzanne and I had some emotional discussions about if we want to basically here worship communism under which this has built? Obviously not. But we maybe can say that bad regimes are not an excuse for bad architecture. So all the architects right now listening to us, because some of the regimes we are operating under might not be as good as we wish, but this cannot be an excuse to be lame. This is a room that we would have gotten if it would have been summer, because now it's winter, and but this is a very pleasant hotel room that shows you brise soleils on the top and at the bottom. We then moved on, Jay, for you too, because I know your favorite city in Portugal is actually not Porto, but the other one, which is Lisbon. Am I correct with that?
Yes, you are.
So for you, of course, we celebrated New Year's Eve in your favorite city, in your favorite country. And here it is. Suzanne invited me in a nice high-rise hotel that she's been some few years ago. And you are here at the former Expo in '98, just to recall that. Portugal had the World Expo. And this is the location. You see a lot of glass buildings here. And in fact, I was then walking New Year's Day and trying to get the best architecture. And there we are. It's Álvaro Siza again, who did the Portuguese pavilion. And this is especially for you, Jay, because you're a fan of public space and the celebration of that one. Here, grantedly, everyone was still boozed up and hangovered, on New Year's Day. So that's why there are no people. If you give it some more weeks and it gets hot again in Portugal and in Lisbon down there, everyone will gather there, because it's about something that we undervalue these days, which is shade, right? You can't be out and gather in an agora and sweat like a pig. So Álvaro Siza knew that, right? The construction is rather amazing, because this big hanging roof looks like out of textile, but it's actually out of concrete. And it's starting to age, right? You see some spots of some rebars coming through. That is okay. It's not falling down, and aging in grays is okay in architecture and as in humane architecture. And sometimes the marble chips off, but you see that dowel in there. So it's all good, but it shows. It actually gets better over time. No fear of got to put makeup on, got to make a fake facade. There's no need. And in fact, it kind of looks classical, maybe even classicist. And I'm not going down to the ballroom in Washington, D.C. at the White House, but you get the point, right? There is uncultivated classicism, Jay, as we did a show about so many years ago in Trump's first term. And then there is cultivated classicism. And this is certainly cultivated classicism, as been revisiting the school we did some 8 years after Álvaro did the pavilion here, that classicism even can be bioclimatic, right? You can make buildings that actually save the planet, and they can still look like some leaders in the world, are liking it. So there's not necessarily a conflict of interest. There's actually a fine line to potentially walk on. So Shift is this movement that is revisiting what we've been doing, Jay, for all these years, where we as Western cultures have been looking down on the one in the Southern Hemisphere and conquered them, which we're currently doing again, unfortunately, right? So a bunch of people from all over the world are getting together, scratching their heads, as you can tell, and thinking about, okay, maybe even with the best intentions, what have we been doing maybe not so well? And you see people as important here from the European scene as Stefan Benisch at the bottom left, and you see Anna Heringer, who is an amazing architect here from Bavaria, who are all willing to do better. And they have already tried to do well. I'm also here, Jay, in my sabbatical to look back at my own doings in the same capacity. So we had been building these tram stations for the expo in Hanover that we had 2 years after, the one in Lisbon. And on the right side, you see tram stations by Eduardo Souto de Moura, who is, again, like the kind of the foster child professionally of Álvaro Siza. And these were published in this Italian magazine here side by side. So I took some time to spend around the train stations. And again, they don't look spectacular at the first glimpse, but the closer you look, and also typologically, Jay, because we finally had gotten a heavy rail, very heavy rail, the heart, that actually goes to the airport. Unfortunately, not yet in the right direction to downtown. That's yet to come, but soon, but under big efforts. Here, this is actually close. This is one station before the Porto airport. This is light rail, right? You can do that. You don't have to do the heavy thing we've been doing there. You can do it very light on a light note. And then we have to show Ziza's inaugural project here, which is right at the ocean, which is a public bath in the outskirts of Porto. And it's a beautiful architecture. This is, again, this is very early, mid-century, last century. It's all still there. It's all very natural. It's all very rugged. And this is, well, it is what you see, right? And this is, it's still original. There are the urinals here. There are the copper pipes. Everything is exposed. Everything is simple. And it works, right? And last time we were in Venice, show quote at the bottom left, the sort of the equivalent or the sibling of Visa basically had been building the same thing there in Venice. And so it's amazing to see these things that have been built well and they still pretty much work. How amazing that is that. And there you got the faucet. The faucet is out of, there you go again, is out of copper, right? So you wash your hand and you touch that, right? And it automatically sensitizes your hand. Why have we forgotten these things? And that's why we're here to remind us of that. And this is something I pulled from the web here. You see, this is from the same year. I saw the light of Earth, and the year after you came to Honolulu, this is 66. And this is when Alvaro designed this beautiful symbiosis between nature and architecture here. And it's the little details, Jay. That's what we want. It's not the big gestures, the grand gestures. Look at Eduardo's station there, how people behave in there. You know, there's the seating inside, protected, wind protected, but there's a seat outside that this gentleman likes to sit there. So it's these nuances. And on the right side, this is new, right? This is the equivalent to when Kurt Sandburn asked me, what's the best new piece in architecture some years ago? And I said the Rainbow Drive canopy, which, you know, is many people then start saying, you know, is he okay? You know, so I say this is the best piece of architecture I've seen, or we have seen, because it serves, you know, dogs, right? And it serves people of different kinds. And you can fill your water bottle and you can fill your mouth. And actually, a child can fill its mouth very conveniently as much as an adult. So I would say this is really cool, literally and figuratively speaking. And what does it all have to do with Honolulu? Has to do with this book that you're going to get your copy, and everyone can buy it now because it's out there. And we have a couple of, we as the Soto Brown, Don Hibbert, Bill Chapman, and myself. And down there you see the institutions that are associated. Of course, ThinkTech Hawaii, the School of Architecture, Docomomo, the Bishop Museum, and also the American Institute of Architecture. And we have to also look what's new in Honolulu. And this is a new project here up for development, which the bottom part, we start kind of cynical, looks not that bad because it has louvers, might be wood, there might be shade behind, not too bad. But that's how the building really looks that's above it. And, you know, we're getting up in age here. I mean, show-wise, you see on the top left, 7 years ago, the same architects have done a building. And we pointed out that these architects should have known better because they designed the Apple store, the entrance Apple store in New York City that you see there out of glass. So they know how to really do top-notch work. But they're selling out and they're taking the easy way out, not just once, but a second time, because this is a new proposal here. They call it the Muse. And I already say we're not amused by it. We call it fossil formalism, and we don't know what shaped this form here. Maybe a hurricane hit it or what, and what not. And then our guest, Matt Noblet from Banish in Boston for many shows, said, okay, don't judge a book by the cover. Don't judge a building by its outside. Go inside. These are the renderings that we find. Needless to say, this doesn't amuse us, right? Because we know when we look which direction that is. We're facing west, looking to the right. We're facing south, looking to the left. We see Diamond Head. This is where the sun is. This is where the sun gets hot. And what they rendered here as a little bit of strips of sun is downplayed. This is going to be heavily heated and overheated and microwaved and needs fossil fuel, and we cannot support that. So says Shift, and this is again Thomas Auer, professor at TUM, who has for many years been an advocate for double facades. Even in the predating show, Jay, Urban Transcendence, we had Ulf Meyer, who worked for another German firm, our German architectural firm, Ingenhofen, and we were heatedly already, literally and figuratively, discussing double facades. But they were well meant because the shading would go in between the two glass panels. But now at Shift, we say, okay, even if we save energy in the operation of the building, does it justify an immense gray energy investment in the construction of the building, or do we need to simplify building? And I caught Thomas in flagranti in his office at TUM. TUM is, by the way, ranked number 27 university in the world and the first in the European Union, and they have been a very generous host for the last fall semester for 5 School of Architecture, University of Hawaii students. Here is Thomas cleaning out his office, and I asked him, are you really throwing away these models? And he says, yes, I do, because they are the past, and now we're going to work on the future with the emerging generation. So here we are in the most recent Shift meeting here, and I put an AIA sticker because Illya Azaroff, we originally wanted to do the show with as well, but he's so busy because he just got elected national AIA president. So we're happy to have Illya also with us at Shift. And this was in Venice, his presentation. And he is very interested in Hawaii because he presented a project at the very top left, his own research and work with Hawaii. And we had, at that meeting, we had an interesting discussion, Jay, that we don't need to rewrite history. One shouldn't do that, but one should maybe adjust history. Even like the precedents for Shift, we actually have some potential that is not used. So for example, Frank Lloyd Wright. So most people, when you go out on the street and say, who's America's most famous architect, many would say Frank Lloyd Wright, right? And so when you would ask what for, they probably say the Guggenheim or Falling Water. But in the Shift way, we should shift that and say it might be, which you see at the bottom, at the top in the middle, the solar hemicycle, also officially called the Jacobs House 2, which is in Madison, Wisconsin, from 1948, which is pretty much a passive house building, right? So we might even remember our own, people for, I'm not saying the wrong thing, but not necessarily for the right thing. And Illya and I had an interesting discussion about that. Maybe we should add to the database of Shift of contemporary projects, also historic projects where people had already been shifting, and but it's not that known. And I'm closing and then opening it up to our discourse about it, about that we, Jay, at the University of Hawaii School of Architecture, we have the only Doctor of Architecture degree, not just in the country, I'm talking the United States of America, but the world. So whoever clever guy had been launching that way back ever since, we are, I should say, stuck with it, because it's very hard to live up to that expectation, right? If you're an employer and you're saying, oh, I can get a master in architecture degree person to hire, or a doctor of architecture, if you go for that doctor of architecture person, you have a higher expectation. So I'm very proud now that in that program is our very own Martin Anselini, right? Already a very seasoned architect who actually goes back to school, as Suzanne is doing, right? They're in their, prime time of their life, and they basically decide to go back. So I finally, with Martin, I think maybe that would be something that we would recommend to these many architects in Honolulu, and saying, hey, how about you go back and confront continuous education, and you add on to what you already know. And when you have that degree, maybe then you put that to work, and architecture will all of a sudden be as good as it was mid-century. Okay, how does that sound, Jay?
Can you tell me what I would learn in the PhD program that I did not learn in the undergraduate architectural program?
You say something really critical to clarify, because it is not a PhD program. So the Doctor of Architecture, that's one of the confusing things, right? You can get actually PhDs at many schools, nationally and internationally, but this is not a PhD. It's a Doctor of Architecture that is highly research-based, and that's the point. So it's basically pretty much like, if not reinventing the wheel of architecture, but significantly reshaping, readjusting, realigning the wheel so that it runs smoother in terms of saving the planet and saving the people. So people and planet friendliness is at least what, Martin Anselini, that I'm very blessed and honored, privileged to work with on his PhD, and he will push it. And it will push pretty much, first of all, the discipline, which is important, and then to have an influence on the profession, potentially.
The other thing I was going to ask you, Martin, is the sort of the comparison, because architecture reflects the culture, the society, and the society yields architecture. And so for the longest time, architecture, for example, in the United States was nothing like architecture in Europe, for example. But is that coming together? Is one following the other? Is there a trend, a movement, a shift, if you will, of American architecture to join European architecture, or vice versa? Are we going in the same direction, or are we going in different directions? Because I think our culture has gone in different directions. Is our architecture going in different directions too? How would you compare, the shift, if you will, in European architecture as against any shift, if there is one, in American architecture?
Well, now I wish we would have more than 4 minutes left, but it also gives us a chance for another show to elaborate more on that. The short version is, it's really interesting at this point of time in history that we're writing right now, Jay. This is really, as we know in the past, because we Germans have screwed up so badly, and especially hurt, your folks, Jay, your Jews. I'm sorry for that. We'll always say and always mean, and you were forgiving us and put us back on our feet. And you got the best of us, of our architects, rightly so, in the United States of America, who then all came and found a safe place to practice. And in a way, then because of that, modernism has the modernism, the European Bauhaus, really totally blossomed and flourished and fully developed itself actually in America, because it wasn't able, because of self-inflicted reasons, where it came from. And now it's really interesting in like, okay, is this going to go reverse? As universities in Europe and in Germany, I'm saying, okay, now we're going to give refuge to researchers, from America. So it's kind of a reversing, process. But actually, Shift is not doing any of that. Shift is looking at us as the same, as actually Western Hemisphere, right? As developed countries and cultures that for too long have been looking down on the underdeveloped. Because where are we, right, Jay? Where is our footprint on the planet that we have as these quasi-sophisticated cultures? It's too big, right? So we have failed. That's the big provocative self-accuse of Shift, in saying, and some of us hopefully even at least had good intentions, but doesn't matter because we failed. Look at Martin's and Bundit's culture, right? Colombia and Thailand, right? they have the smaller footprint, right? So it's only logic to relearn from them. And that's what Shift is pretty much about. Say the ones who have mastered to still be more connected to their roots, to their indigenous practices, not always because they wanted to, because of, socio-political, economical circumstances, but the fact is that they are less of a burden to the world. So this is our opportunity to relearn. And that's why I am at this thesis, although I'm officially Martin's thesis advisor, but I should actually give him his money back because I'm learning from him more than he can learn from me because he's from the culture that have done better. Isn't that shocking, but also very exciting?
We talk from time to time about public spaces as a reflection of the culture, and for that matter, the government and the evolution of the government in Europe and in the US and in Hawaii, which is kind of different in the sense that we have so much weather, so much attractive weather, so much space to enjoy, but we don't enjoy it. And I wonder if you could compare the notion and appreciation of public space in Europe as against the notion and appreciation of parks and other public spaces in Hawaii, and for that matter, the US in general. I mean, it seems to me that there are so many places that should have more public spaces for people to gather and enjoy, but they don't, for capital concentration reasons and for government blindness. What do you think?
Yeah, the C, so capital concentration and climate. And climate, of course, is a big influence. But interestingly enough, I mean, here I'm broadcasting from freezing rain, drizzling. It's actually over-iced. So people being out there in the public, they can't survive much. I mean, you can try to dress as warm as you can, but you're only going to make it so far. But people, whenever they have the chance and temperatures going up, for example, our New Year's Eve in Lisbon, right? It was probably 9 degrees Celsius out there. So that makes it like 50, lower 50s. This is the coldest it ever gets, right? Everyone in Hawaii says, okay, I'm going to, die of a frostbite. Of course they're not. But it gets chilly. But no one will ever think about sitting outside, right? And they did. We actually sat outside. We didn't make reservations, stupid us. So then we were given space outside, and they had, which is obviously something that we don't want to, support, which is heaters, electric heaters. They're, consuming energy, but they make this effort to really indulge, because when you don't have it all the time, you appreciate it when it's there, right? You really do. In Hawaii, it seems we have this abundance of the nicest weather all year round, day and night. And it needed like something tragic as COVID to push people outside and sit outside in the parklets and these things, right? So it's really kind of ironic. And then our Western lifestyle of air conditioning came mid-century and was supposedly something sophisticated. And we really should have learned and know by now it was not, right? So undo that and saying, okay, let's say goodbye to that. We go back to natural systems. And Hawaii could and should be that place, but we need more shade, right? But shade can also be and should actually be vegetative, right? If you just reforest entire Honolulu the way it used to be, and you have a solid canopy. We all know these alleys, and streets with monkey pots, Kapiolani Boulevard, right, with the big trees. That's beautiful. It's so pleasant to be under. So that should actually be something that should be mandated, right, by the city. It should be like, okay, just build shade, and in here, that shade gets naked, right, in the wintertime. And then you don't need it, right? But it's a lot more effort. In Hawaii, not so much. So we really need to recalibrate. So I'm really excited once you get your copy of the Honolulu book, where the publisher gave us the right not to talk about what we don't want to support. So the shocking thing will be that the architecture that has been arising. You used to have the movie show with George Kaysen that just WhatsApp me and says hi. And so you probably would watch and review Avatar 3. James Cameron has once again, I think, going through Kaka'ako when he was dwelling again and expanding on his bridgehead city, which is all an imperialist, suppressive stuff. And I think he would like what we're suggesting in the book as coming from the emerging generation, as to basically decolonize and de-capital concentrate, as you like to say, Hawaii, and make it paradise again.
Where can I get the book, Martin?
DeSoto will hand deliver it to you, because you have been had such an impact on the book that the choice of projects, Jay, we went through the list of shows that we did and say, okay, the reason why we did shows about projects that we like means they need to be in the book. And then this is the only book. There's 150 books out for all major cities in the world that the publisher, who's a German architectural couple, thought are worth it. And this is the only book, thanks to you, that has QR codes to the shows, that if the reader wants to know more depth, they can go with their phone, go on the QR code, and then they get the 30 as we're back to. And now we need to close the show because you said that, and the few ones that drag a little longer from the recent times. But that's DeSoto has given the one to Ethel, and the next one he's going to give is to you. So it can only be days.
Is it going to be on Amazon?
It is already. It's everywhere. Yeah, it's on Amazon. It's everywhere. Yeah.
I do have one last question I really need to ask you. You've had a couple of slides here which had graffiti. And so you have this really wonderful, immaculate, soaring architecture in so many places that is so valuable, so nourishing. And yet there are people who come around, young people who should be, there's one, interested in the beauty of it. And yet they come around and they deface it. In my view, they deface it with graffiti. And this troubles me. I don't know if it troubles you. I would like to know if it troubles you. What would you say to those people?
Yeah, I mean, graffiti is interesting because we know graffiti is originally, we're now fighting for freedom of thought and freedom of expression, right? And it is certainly originally that. It is that people were able to, or willing to, voice themselves in a way that you would say, okay, it can compromise people's property, of course, but then it also has become an art. And we know in Kaka'ako it's been used. I allow myself to say it's probably the best in Kaka'ako of the new developments. I think the developers at some point realized it's also bad what they're doing. They better do something good. And then they commissioned, graffiti artists and muralists to basically make big graffitis, right? And these are commissioned graffitis. And in between, there is a fine line. I came to the point, Jay, when we designed the tram stations, we became experts in anti-vandalism technologies and techniques of which material needed to be coated in such way and that you can sort of clean it off again. But I came to the point to come to peace with and saying, I'm not if I'm serious about public spaces and places, tram stations are these spaces of short-term occupancy where people have the time together and they come together. And sometimes not people who even know each other, and then they have time on their hands. And I think, allowing people to do whatever they want to do is the quintessence of that. I try to fight it, and advise my client and consult him. And, we really became experts in which material needs what, coating, so you can basically get it off. But I actually, over the years, really there comes one to my mind, which is the one that's clad with basalt. So very Hawaii. And then our exotic escapism expert, Susanna, is sitting in front of it. And and behind her are a couple of hearts and like love declarations, and so it's, I think, at the end, it's a little bit like from the architects and the creators' point of view, is like let go and allow and embrace and welcome, and because these days, Jay, don't need to remind us and you, the expression of freedom of thought and is ultimately important. So I think
that's a great statement, isn't it? It's a statement of freedom of thought. It's a statement of expression by those who would like to express themselves. It's also a statement that these people feel that the existing architecture may not be as creative as they are, that they may be actually are architecture critics in their own way. And I wonder if the School of Architecture here at UH Manoa or elsewhere would ever include, are you ready for this? Are you sitting down? Would ever include a course in architectural graffiti?
That would be great. And thanks for reminding me. Something I forgot to say also for us in Honolulu as to provoke. Porto, which is a city of population like Honolulu. So it's around a little like half to two, thirds of a million, the city itself, and then comes city and county is bigger, right? So it's comparable. Are you sitting as well, Jay? So are we in Honolulu having one Pritzker Prize winner in architecture? No, we don't. Porto has two. Sudodemura and Zia, right? So here, young people making a statement to a Pritzker Prize winner. And that is fair and fine, I think. But what's not fair and fine is that we don't have. So we want the architects to all go into the DARC program, right? And elevate themselves above and beyond. And when you read the book, in many ways, you just need to look at your roots. So like the big firms, like Architects Hawaii, the founder, Frank Haynes, they just need to revisit their own founder of their firm, and there they go again, right? And then they can do good again, and then we will have Pritzker Prize winners, and of course we need the emerging generation, and that's really necessary. We're kind of downplaying it in Honolulu way too much these days.
Martin, we're really out of time. Sorry.
Yeah.
Can you say goodbye to people?
I will do, but not without saying tune in next week, because it will be DeSoto Brown and Jay Fidell with their show. And then in this rhythm, we're going to be back, and we talked about Thomas Auer, professor at TUM and initiator of SHIFT and many other things. He will be our guest on Humane Architecture. And thank you, Jay, for this show and taking us to your favorite country and your favorite city, your favorite culture.
Thank you, Martin. Aloha.
Bye-bye.